The cowboy had been riding since early morning, moving slowly along the narrow trail that curved beside the river. The sun was warm, the sky was clear, and the land was quiet except for the soft sound of his horse's hooves and the distant call of birds. He planned to reach a nearby town by evening, buy supplies, and continue toward a ranch job he had been offered. It was supposed to be a simple day, peaceful and without surprises. But life on the frontier rarely followed plans, and sometimes a single moment could change the direction of everything. As he approached a patch of willows near the water, he noticed something unusual. At first he thought it was an animal, maybe a deer bending down to drink. But when he got closer, he saw the shape of a person. A small, elderly woman sitting alone on a fallen tree trunk. Her shoulders were shaking and her hands were pressed against her face. She was crying quietly, her sorrow heavy enough that even the horse slowed down on its own, as if sensing something was wrong. The cowboy stopped a few steps away. He gently tugged the reins and let his horse rest. He had seen sadness many times before, grief after storms, fear after sickness, worry after loss. But something about this old woman's tears stirred him deeper than usual. Maybe it was the way she looked so alone in the vast landscape. Maybe it was the way her crying sounded like she had been carrying this pain for years. Or maybe it was simply because the cowboy had always been the kind of man who stopped when someone needed help, even if he didn't know what kind of help he could give. He cleared his throat gently so he wouldn't startle her. The woman lifted her head, and when she saw him, she quickly wiped her face with the edge of her shawl. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, her eyes tired, and her hands rough from years of work. She belonged to one of the Apache bands that lived in the area, and the cowboy felt a bit of nervousness. Encounters between settlers and Apache people could become tense if misunderstood. But he also knew that kindness often crossed boundaries where suspicion failed. He asked softly if she was all right. She tried to smile, but her voice trembled as she said she was fine. The cowboy didn't believe it. No one cried like that and felt fine. He dismounted and stepped closer, keeping his movements slow and respectful. He didn't want her to feel threatened. After a long pause, she took a deep breath and told him he didn't need to worry, that her troubles were her own. The cowboy nodded but didn't leave. Something in her voice sounded like she needed someone to listen, even if she didn't want to admit it. Finally, she whispered the words she had been holding back. She said that her daughter, her only child, had reached the age when most young women married, settled down, and began building families. But no one in their village wanted to marry her. The old woman's voice cracked with each word. She said her daughter was gentle, skilled, hard-working, and kind. Yet the men of the tribe looked past all of that. They did not see her real nature. They only saw rumors that had spread over time. The cowboy asked quietly why the rumors had started. The old woman shook her head. She said her daughter was quiet and preferred to stay near home, weaving baskets or helping at the river. Some people mistook her silence for strangeness. Others believed lies without even speaking to her. A few men said she was unlucky, though they had no proof and no reason. Lies had grown like weeds, pushing away the truth. And now, the girl lived with the pain of being judged unfairly day after day. The cowboy listened carefully. He felt something close to anger rising inside his chest, not toward the old woman, but toward the people who had made her suffer. He knew how quickly people whispered, how easily they believed the worst about others, how rarely they took time to understand. He had seen good people hurt by careless words many times in his life. It never sat right with him. The old woman looked at him with desperate eyes and asked why people were so quick to judge her daughter. The cowboy had no answer. Sometimes humans caused harm without even thinking, and that truth was painful to speak. She continued speaking, her voice breaking more with each sentence. She said she feared her daughter would grow old alone, not because she was unworthy, but because her own people refused to see her heart. The cowboy felt the weight of her words. He didn't know the daughter yet, but the mother's sorrow was real, and no mother cried like that unless her love was deep. The cowboy asked what she wanted from him. She hesitated, ashamed to make a request. She said she only wished for someone, anyone, to look at her daughter without judgment, without fear, without rumors. She didn't ask him for marriage or promises. She only asked for someone to see the truth. Even a single moment of kindness might give the girl courage to continue facing the world. The cowboy stood quietly for a long time. He looked at the sky, then at the river, then at the mother who had been fighting alone for so long. He thought of all the times strangers had been kind to him when he needed it. He thought about how different his life might have been if nobody had ever stopped to help. He finally nodded. He told the old woman that he would meet her daughter, not to make promises, but because no one deserved to be judged by lies. The relief on her face was so strong that she nearly collapsed. She placed her hand over her heart and whispered a thank you. The cowboy helped her stand, and they began walking toward her village. The path was narrow, winding through trees and small hills. The old woman walked slowly, leaning on her stick, her shoulders still heavy, but now carrying a spark of hope. The cowboy led his horse beside them, matching her pace. The sun was lowering behind the mountains, casting a warm golden glow over the land. They walked in silence for long stretches, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like the kind of silence that came before something important. As they approached the village, the cowboy noticed the way the homes were arranged in a circle, smoke rising from small fires, children running near the river. It looked peaceful on the surface, but he could feel tension beneath it. People watched newcomers with sharp eyes. Stories traveled faster than truth here. The old woman guided him to her lodge near the center, her steps quickening with nervousness. She asked him to wait outside for a moment while she went in to speak to her daughter. The cowboy nodded and stood quietly, listening to the soft murmur of their voices inside. He wondered what kind of young woman he was about to meet and what burdens she carried. When the daughter finally stepped out, the cowboy understood instantly why her mother cried the way she did. The girl's eyes held gentle strength, but also deep loneliness. She kept her hands folded, not out of fear, but because years of judgment had taught her to shrink her presence. Her face was calm, but her heart looked tired. The cowboy smiled softly, not out of pity, but out of respect. And in that small moment, the girl lifted her gaze just enough to meet his. It was then he realized that stopping beside the river was not an accident. It was the beginning of something none of them had expected. When the young Apache woman stepped out of the lodge, the evening light fell softly on her face. She looked unsure, as if she was preparing herself for another moment of judgment. Years of unkind whispers had taught her to expect the worst from strangers. But the cowboy's quiet, respectful gaze surprised her. He didn't look away, nor did he stare rudely. His eyes held a warm calmness, the kind that made people feel seen instead of measured. For a long moment she stood still, unsure of how to speak or what to say. The old woman gently touched her daughter's arm, encouraging her. She told her that the cowboy had listened to her story, that he had shown kindness when she needed it most. The daughter's eyes widened slightly. Kindness from outsiders was rare. Kindness from her own people was even rarer. She stepped a little closer, though her hands remained nervously folded in front of her. The cowboy greeted her in a simple, steady voice, careful not to make her uncomfortable. He asked her name, and she said it quietly. He repeated it with respect, making sure he pronounced it right. A faint, surprised expression crossed her face. Most strangers didn't bother to say it correctly. The old woman watched this small exchange as if it were the first drop of rain after a long drought. Inside the lodge, they sat around a small fire. The cowboy removed his hat out of politeness, holding it against his knee. The daughter sat opposite him, her posture straight, her eyes lifted just enough to show she was listening. The old woman served them a warm drink made from herbs and roots. It smelled slightly bitter, but it gave comfort after long days of worry. The cowboy began asking simple questions, nothing too personal, nothing that would make her uncomfortable. He asked her about the baskets hanging on the wall. She nodded and said she made them. The designs were beautiful. Spirals, patterns inspired by the land, colors taken from plants and bark. He picked one up carefully, turning it in his hands, and told her he had never seen such fine work before. Her cheeks warmed at the honest compliment. She wasn't used to praise. Most people ignored her skills, too busy chasing gossip. He asked about her daily life. She explained she spent mornings gathering reeds or weaving, afternoons helping children or preparing food with her mother, evenings sitting by the river because she liked the quiet. The cowboy noticed how her voice softened when she talked about nature. She said the river soothed her thoughts, and the tall grasses made her feel safe. He could tell she was someone who found meaning in small things. Sunlight on water, the rustling of leaves, the sound of birds. As she spoke more freely, the cowboy noticed something important. She was not shy because she was strange. She was quiet because she was thoughtful. She chose her words with care. She listened deeply before speaking. There was nothing wrong with her. There had never been anything wrong with her. The real problem was that the village had never taken time to understand her. The mother watched closely as her daughter talked, her heart warming. She had waited so long to see her child speak with confidence in front of someone new. She waited even longer to see someone actually listen. After some time, the cowboy stepped outside to stretch his legs. The mother followed him, her footsteps slow but determined. She asked him softly what he thought of her daughter. The cowboy said she was gentle, talented, and wise beyond her years. The mother's eyes filled with emotion, but she blinked it back. She didn't want to cry again, not now, not when hope was finally showing itself. While he stood outside, the cowboy watched the villagers from a distance. Some were preparing food, some were fixing tools, some were sitting quietly by the fire. He noticed how a few of them looked toward the lodge with curiosity. One or two whispered something to each other. He could guess what they were saying. They were wondering why a cowboy would be sitting with a woman their own people ignored. He shook his head slowly. People often mocked what they didn't take time to understand. He wished they could see what he had seen in just one evening. Later, the cowboy returned inside, and the daughter asked him softly what life was like beyond their lands. She had never traveled far, and she wanted to know how the world felt from a horse's saddle. He told her about crossing long open plains, about sleeping under the stars, about finding work on ranches where the days were hard but honest. She smiled faintly at some of his stories. Stories of stubborn horses, curious wild animals, and the surprising kindness of strangers in tiny towns. He could tell she liked hearing about things she had never experienced. Her eyes brightened with curiosity, something her own people rarely drew out of her. As the evening deepened, the fire crackled softly between them. The daughter grew more comfortable, speaking a little more, asking questions she had once been too shy to ask. She told him she always wondered what lay beyond the hills, why the sky changed colors so quickly at dawn, and why some people carried hardness in their hearts while others carried gentleness. Her questions were simple but deep, the kind that came from someone who spent a lot of time thinking quietly. The cowboy found himself smiling more than he expected. He enjoyed talking to her. There was a peacefulness in her presence, the kind that made even a tired traveler feel at ease. Outside, night settled over the village. Torches flickered, and the air grew cooler. The old woman laid blankets near the fire and invited the cowboy to rest since he would spend the night before returning on his journey. He thanked her kindly. As he sat down, he noticed the daughter watching him with a soft, unsure expression. He wondered what she was thinking. Maybe she was not used to someone speaking with her as an equal. Before resting, he stepped out one more time. The sky was full of stars. The river shimmered faintly as it reflected the moonlight. The whole village was quiet now, except for a distant drum beat from another lodge. The cowboy breathed in the cool night air and let his thoughts settle. He realized something unexpected. He had come to this place only to help an old woman who seemed lost in her sorrow. Yet he had found something far more meaningful, a truth that others refused to see. The daughter did not need pity. She did not need someone to save her. She only needed someone to understand her, to see beyond the unfair stories people told. The cowboy made a small promise to himself. He would not walk away after this meeting. He would not let injustice stand unchallenged. The daughter deserved fairness, and her mother deserved peace of mind. If he could offer even a small part of that, he would. When he returned inside, the daughter looked up at him. He smiled as he sat down near the fire. She smiled back shyly, though her eyes carried a growing trust. The old woman watched the two of them silently, her heart swelling. She had prayed for years that someone, anyone, would see her daughter for who she truly was. Tonight, she saw the first sign that her prayers might finally be answered. And as the fire warmed the quiet lodge, the cowboy realized that what began as a simple stop by the river had turned into something much deeper, something he couldn't ignore, no matter where his path was supposed to lead next. The next morning, the village stirred with life. Smoke rose from small fires, and children ran barefoot through the dusty paths, laughing and chasing each other. The air smelled faintly of baked bread and herbs from the women preparing their morning work. The cowboy walked beside the old woman and her daughter toward the center of the village, where the people often gathered to talk and trade. Even at this early hour, several villagers had noticed their presence and paused to watch. Curious eyes followed their steps, whispering quietly to one another. The old woman's hands were slightly trembling as she guided her daughter through the small crowd. She could feel the tension around them, the unspoken questions from the villagers. Who was this stranger? Why had he spent the night in their home? Why was he speaking with her daughter in a way they had never seen before? The old woman's heart pounded, but she held her head high. She trusted the cowboy, and that trust gave her courage. The daughter walked closely beside her mother, her steps measured, her eyes occasionally flicking toward the watching villagers. She was nervous, but there was a small spark of confidence in her posture, a spark that had not been there before. She had felt the cowboy's kindness, his respect, and that simple act had changed something inside her. She knew that for the first time, someone genuinely saw her, and it gave her strength. The cowboy led them to a quiet spot near the center of the village, away from the busiest paths, but still visible enough for others to see. He stood tall, shoulders relaxed but firm, and greeted anyone who came close with a nod and a calm voice. The villagers were wary at first, their suspicion clear. Some of the men whispered among themselves, their eyes scanning the cowboy's face as if trying to read his intentions. One of the elders stepped forward, frowning, and asked in a firm voice why he was there and what business he had with the young Apache woman. The cowboy answered clearly and calmly, his words measured. He said he had come because he had heard her story, had listened to her mother, and wanted to see for himself the young woman who had been judged unfairly by those around her. He said he did not come to force anyone to do anything or to interfere in the ways of the tribe. He only wanted to speak truth and fairness. His voice carried honesty, and there was no hint of arrogance or disrespect. The villagers were surprised by his courage and by the simple strength of his words. One of the men sneered, saying that cowboys could never understand Apache people and their ways. The cowboy shook his head gently. He said that while their customs might be different, human hearts were much the same. Respect and fairness were universal, he explained, and judging someone without knowing them was never right. He spoke slowly, making sure each word was understood. His tone was firm, yet not threatening. It was the kind of tone that made people stop and think. The young woman watched from a few steps behind her mother. She had never heard such words spoken in her direction with honesty. Most people either ignored her or spread rumors, but the cowboy's words carried truth. She felt her chest fill with a light she had not known in years. Her mother's hand brushed hers briefly, a small gesture of reassurance. The daughter's eyes glimmered, and she took a deep breath, standing a little taller. Some villagers shifted uncomfortably. It was not often that a stranger challenged their assumptions in such a calm and respectful way. A few older men muttered quietly to one another, unsure of how to respond. The cowboy did not argue, did not push, and did not scold. He simply spoke the truth, letting it stand in the open air for all to see. After a few moments, he turned to the daughter and spoke directly to her. He told her that he had heard about her skills, her kindness, and her gentle nature. He reminded her that she had value, not because of what others said, but because of who she truly was. He said that she did not need to shrink or hide, that her life was hers to live, and that no one should ever make her feel small. The daughter's eyes welled up with tears, not of sadness but of relief. For the first time, someone had recognized her worth openly and without judgment. The old woman could not hold back her own tears. She placed her hand on her chest, feeling the heaviness of years of worry and loneliness lift slightly. She had hoped for fairness, yes, but never dared to expect it. Seeing a stranger defend her daughter with such clarity and courage brought a deep sense of gratitude. She whispered a quiet prayer of thanks to the sky, her heart swelling with relief and hope. The villagers continued to watch. Some were moved by what they saw, though pride and fear kept them silent. Others were unsure, caught between curiosity and old habits of judgment. But the seed had been planted, and some of them could not ignore it. They saw a young woman, calm and capable, standing with dignity, and a cowboy who treated her with respect. It was a scene unlike anything they had witnessed before. As the morning sun climbed higher, the cowboy invited the young woman to walk with him around the village. He asked her to show him the places she loved, the spots where she felt most at peace. She hesitated, unsure if she should accept, but something inside her urged her forward. She wanted to experience this small adventure, to share her world with someone who truly cared. She led him first to the river, where the water flowed gently over smooth stones. She told him how she liked to sit here in the mornings, listening to the water and watching the fish. Her voice was soft but confident, and the cowboy listened carefully, asking questions that encouraged her to speak more. Next, she guided him to a small grove of trees where she often collected herbs and plants. She showed him which leaves could be used for medicine and which flowers were safe to eat. The cowboy nodded, impressed by her knowledge. He could see that she was intelligent, skilled, and connected to her land in a way few people were. Her quiet life had not made her weak. It had made her strong, observant, and patient. As they walked, the daughter spoke more freely. She asked him about life beyond the village, about the lands he had traveled, and the people he had met. The cowboy shared his stories in a gentle, engaging way, describing wide, open plains, towering mountains, and towns filled with strangers from faraway places. He spoke about challenges he had faced, mistakes he had made, and moments of kindness that had stayed with him. The young woman listened eagerly, her eyes bright with curiosity. She had never experienced the world beyond her village, and for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine possibilities she had never dared to dream. Meanwhile, the old woman stayed nearby, keeping a watchful eye. She could feel a quiet shift taking place within her daughter. She saw the girl's shoulders relax, her steps grow steadier, and her eyes shine with a mixture of excitement and cautious hope. It was a transformation she had prayed for quietly, and now it was unfolding before her. By late morning, the cowboy and the young woman returned to the lodge. They spoke with the mother, sharing what they had seen and learned. The daughter smiled shyly but genuinely, feeling for the first time that her thoughts, her knowledge, and her existence mattered. The mother felt a relief so profound that it brought tears to her eyes again, but this time they were tears of joy and gratitude rather than worry and fear. The villagers continued to watch from a distance, curious and thoughtful. Some of them began to reconsider their judgments, though old habits were hard to break. The presence of the cowboy and his gentle insistence on fairness had opened a small window in their minds, a window through which truth and understanding might eventually enter. As the sun reached its highest point, the old woman finally spoke. She thanked the cowboy for his honesty, his kindness, and his courage. She told him that what he had done went far beyond words. He had given her daughter something no one else had given, a chance to be seen, to be heard, and to be valued. The cowboy merely smiled, saying that he had only done what anyone should do when they saw injustice. But the mother knew better. His actions were extraordinary, and the impact would be felt for years to come. That evening, as the fire burned in the lodge, the daughter sat quietly beside the cowboy, listening to him recount stories of the land beyond the village once more. She laughed softly at some of his misadventures, and the warmth of genuine connection filled the room. The old woman watched, heart swelling with hope. For the first time in years, she could imagine a future where her daughter's life was not defined by whispers and judgment, but by respect, understanding, and perhaps even love. By the time the moon rose over the hills, the village was quiet once more, and the three of them sat near the fire, feeling a calm they had not known before. The cowboy realized that what had begun as a simple act of kindness had grown into something much greater. He had not come to the village seeking adventure or glory. He had come to stop and listen. And in listening, he had started a change that might transform not only one life, but the lives of an entire family. Later that day, the old woman sat quietly by the fire, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the small flames. She had spent much of her life worrying about her daughter, wondering if she would ever find someone who truly saw her worth. For years, she had carried a heavy heart, believing that her daughter's gentle nature and quiet ways would never be enough in a world that often valued bravado over kindness. The fear of loneliness had shadowed both their lives, and the old woman's worry had become almost a constant companion. She watched her daughter sitting nearby with the cowboy, their conversation calm and thoughtful, and felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. Could it really be that someone had come into their lives not to judge or gossip, but to truly understand? The old woman took a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. She told the cowboy the words she had long kept inside, the words she had feared saying out loud for years. "No one will marry my daughter," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. She shook her head, a tear running down her cheek. "I have worried, prayed, and hoped, but I fear she will live her life alone, and it will be my fault for not protecting her enough." Her hands gripped each other tightly as she spoke, the weight of years of concern pressing heavily on her shoulders. The cowboy listened carefully, his expression calm and sincere. He did not rush to answer, but allowed her words to settle in the room. He could feel the depth of her love, the kind of love that had endured years of quiet suffering, the love that would move mountains if only given a chance. When she finished, he finally spoke, his voice steady and gentle. "I do not know what the future holds," he said, "but I am willing to spend time with your daughter, to learn about her world and let her learn about mine. If it feels right, I will not hesitate to give her the life she deserves, no matter what others think." The old woman froze for a moment, her eyes wide with surprise. She had hoped for kindness, yes, but she had never expected such words. The promise of respect, understanding, and the possibility of love seemed almost too much to believe. She blinked rapidly, fighting back tears as she tried to process what he had just said. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of hope she had not dared imagine. She looked toward her daughter, who had been listening quietly, unsure of how to respond. The young woman's hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from a mixture of disbelief and joy. She had spent so long believing that she was unworthy, that no one would ever truly see her. The cowboy's words were simple, yet powerful. They told her that someone had looked past the whispers, past the judgment, and into her heart. He did not offer false promises, nor did he rush her. He simply acknowledged her worth and extended an invitation to a future that had once seemed impossible. The old woman continued to watch, her heart swelling with relief. She knew that life would not change overnight, but she also knew that a crucial first step had been taken. The cowboy had given her daughter something no one else had given: hope, respect, and the chance to be seen as she truly was. For the first time, she felt that her daughter's life could be guided by understanding rather than judgment, by choice rather than fear. The cowboy turned to the young woman and spoke to her directly, his eyes meeting hers with steady reassurance. "I do not expect anything from you," he said. "I only ask that you be yourself, and we see where life takes us together. I will respect your decisions, your thoughts, and your feelings. If we are meant to walk a path together, it will happen naturally." The daughter's eyes filled with tears, and a small, genuine smile spread across her face. She felt seen in a way she had never been seen before. The old woman placed her hand on her chest, feeling a warmth that had been missing for years. She whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, not only for the cowboy's kindness, but also for the courage she saw growing in her daughter. The young woman had straightened her posture, her shoulders no longer heavy with the weight of judgment. She was beginning to believe in herself, in her own strength, and in the possibility of a life filled with acceptance. Outside the lodge, villagers gathered at a respectful distance, their curiosity evident. Some of them had never seen a stranger treat their people with such fairness and honesty. The cowboy's presence, his calm respect, and his willingness to speak the truth had challenged their long-held assumptions. A few of the elders whispered among themselves, and even some younger men and women looked on thoughtfully. The village was beginning to sense that a change, however small, was occurring in the air. The cowboy suggested to the daughter that they take a walk together, just the two of them, to see the land she loved and the quiet places where she felt most at home. She hesitated at first, shy and unsure, but she nodded, encouraged by his patient and gentle manner. They stepped outside together, moving slowly along the familiar paths near the river. The water glimmered under the sun, reflecting the blue sky above. Birds sang softly, and the air carried the faint scent of wildflowers and fresh grass. It was a simple, peaceful scene, but for the young woman, it felt like a world opening up for the first time. As they walked, she shared her favorite spots with him, the smooth rocks where she liked to sit, the small grove of trees where she collected herbs, the hidden curve of the river where fish sometimes jumped. She spoke of her love for the land, her quiet moments by the water, and the joy she found in simple things. The cowboy listened with genuine interest, asking questions and learning from her. He did not interrupt her, nor did he speak over her experiences. He treated her stories with respect, showing her that what she thought and felt mattered deeply. The young woman began to relax, her initial shyness giving way to curiosity and openness. She asked the cowboy about his travels, about the distant lands he had seen, and about the challenges he had faced. He shared his experiences honestly, telling her of long plains, open skies, and the kindness he had encountered along the way. His stories were simple but vivid, capturing her imagination. She found herself laughing softly at some of his adventures, feeling a sense of connection that had eluded her for years. The old woman watched them from a distance, her heart full of hope. She had feared that her daughter would never experience a life of understanding and respect. Now she saw her child stepping forward with courage, engaging with someone who truly valued her. It was a moment she had longed for, and it felt almost miraculous. As the day progressed, the cowboy and the daughter returned to the lodge, where they spoke further about their hopes, dreams, and the small joys of life. The young woman's laughter became more frequent, her voice more confident. She began to realize that she was capable of forming bonds, of being seen, and of being valued for who she truly was. The old woman felt tears of relief streaming down her face. Years of worry and sleepless nights seemed to lift, replaced by the light of hope. The villagers continued to observe from afar. Some were moved silently, reconsidering the way they had judged the young woman. Others were unsure, hesitant to change old ways, but the seed of awareness had been planted. They saw a stranger treat one of their own, with fairness and respect, and it challenged the stories they had long believed. The cowboy had not sought to confront them. He had simply acted with integrity and compassion, and that alone spoke volumes. As evening fell, the three of them sat near the fire once more. The young woman's smile was brighter, her posture straighter, her eyes reflecting a newfound confidence. The old woman felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing that her daughter had finally begun to experience the recognition and respect she deserved. The cowboy, too, felt something change within him. He had come as a stranger, simply offering a listening ear, but he had become part of a transformation that extended beyond words. Before night fully settled over the village, the old woman spoke softly, her voice filled with emotion. She thanked the cowboy again, acknowledging not just his kindness, but the way he had restored hope and dignity to her daughter's life. The daughter reached out and held her mother's hand, sharing the silent gratitude and relief that words could not fully express. The cowboy smiled, feeling honored to witness such a profound moment of connection, trust, and understanding. The night was calm, and the lodge glowed with the warmth of the fire. Outside, the stars reflected in the river, and the village settled into quiet reflection. The cowboy and the young woman talked softly, planning small walks along the river, learning about each other's worlds, and sharing hopes for the future. The old woman felt a lightness she had not known for decades. The weight of worry, fear, and loneliness was lifted, replaced by the sense that her daughter's life could now be guided by choice, respect, and the possibility of love. By the time the moon reached its highest point, the old woman finally rested, feeling that for the first time in years, her daughter was not alone. The cowboy had given them both more than words could ever express. He had given hope, he had given recognition, and he had shown that simple, genuine kindness could change lives in ways no one expected. And as the gentle night wind blew across the river, the old woman whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, knowing that a new chapter had begun for her daughter, one filled with fairness, understanding, and a future bright with promise.